Good morning. We are in the third section of chapter 9 of Tanya. And in this section, the Alter Rebbe is going to describe to us the wish of the divine soul. When we said in the last section that the divine soul wishes that it alone should have access to the body and that the animal soul should have no access to the body, this is what it means. And the Alter Rebbe goes through in detail each aspect of a person's physiology and explains how it is that the divine soul fills that space. Now, a lot of this is going to be review from what we learned in the earliest chapters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's not a lot of explanation to be given here, but just careful reading of the Alter Rebbe's words will give us a very nice instruction and very nice revelations. So we'll read carefully. We said at the end of yesterday's class, and of course it's yesterday because between Tanya classes, time doesn't pass. The struggle of the divine soul is that it wishes to fill the conscious life of the person and that nothing should get in the way, nothing should interfere, no one else should have any access. What does that mean? Dehainu, you see? Dehainu, that means Tilas Moichin Sheberoish, the 3 brains in the head, Memulayu should be full, Mechabad Shebenefesh Elikis, of the 3 intellects of the divine soul. What are the 3 brains and how do they correspond to the 3 intellects? I will tell you honestly, I don't know. Having said that, let's take a guess. There is the brain that is in charge of instinctive function, that keeps a person alive, that is like the link between the person and the source of life. I don't know what the official term for it is. I used to know, I forgot. Maybe that could parallel Chachma. Then there is the conscious functioning of the brain. That's the majority of the brain. That's the gray and white matter of the brain that covers the majority of the dome of the head. And that is for conscious and decisive action, where you're choosing your behavior, so on and so forth. Maybe that is parallel to the brain of Bina, which is the analytical and restraining, self-discipline brain. And then you have the brain stem that connects the brain with the rest of the body, and maybe that is parallel to the da'as of the divine soul. Da'as being the one that translates what you know into how you feel. The divine soul wishes that all 3 brains should be full only of its interests, of its thoughts, of its drives. Let's see. Shehi, specifically, it means Chochmas Hashem, perceiving Hashem through intuition, curiosity towards Hashem, discovering new thoughts about Hashem. That is Chochmas Hashem, and also Torah. Torah is Chochmas Hashem, Hashem's wisdom. Then there is Bina, the analytical mind of Torah, which means that the divine soul hopes and wishes that the analytical brain of a person should constantly be full of Torah analytics, of Torah theories and thoughts, of Torah ideas. And that extends to your whole conscious life. The whole conscious life of a person should be full of Torah. What does that look like? So I have not seen it in a while, but I'll just give you an idea in short. The Rebbe's friend from university in France and in Germany is Rabbi Soloveitchik from YU. And he wrote a book called The Halachic Man. What is a halachic man? A Jew ought to be a halachic person. What is a halachic person? So one of the things that he describes in that book is that the halachic man is so thoroughly immersed in Torah and specifically in halacha that everything that he sees and experiences in the world reminds him of halacha. And the examples he gives are a halachic man is walking on the beach and is looking at the ocean. And it reminds him about all of the halachas about a person who sets out to sea on Erev Shabbos or a sukkah on top of a boat. The ocean is connected with so many halachas. We just learned yesterday halachas about the possibility of contracting impurity when you're on the sand of the beach where the water is constantly washing over, or then you see the sunset and it reminds you of the whole discussion about exactly when the sun is considered as having set and when it's still considered to be yesterday and when it's considered to be tomorrow. Torah fills the consciousness of the person, that everything that he sees and experiences reminds him of a halacha. For the divine soul, that's perfect. If everything you do and everything you see and everything that you experience is a matter of halacha, is a matter of Torah, that's perfect. But according to Chassidus, it's not just halacha. And of course, this is according to all the students of Torah. The book Halachic Man is focused on the study of Torah for the sake of halacha, but it applies to anything in connection to Torah. If your mind is constantly full of thoughts about Torah, and specifically because this is Chassidus, it's not only Torah, but the giver of the Torah, which is the primary focus of Chassidus. When you learn Torah, you do it in order to connect to the giver of the Torah. Therefore, when we say Chochmas Hashem, we mean, which translates as Hashem's wisdom, we mean also the Torah, but especially we mean to seek out new ways of connecting with Hashem. And when we say the analytical mind of Torah, or the analytical mind of the divine soul, of course it means Talmud and Halacha, and to discover new ways of serving Hashem in actuality. However, in Chassidus, it also means, and it primarily means, to understand Hashem, to meditate, to contemplate his greatness, to contemplate his beauty, to contemplate his kindness, how Hashem is endless, how Hashem is unfathomable. All of the thoughts that the Alter Rebbe has described for us already several times that lead a person to desire greater closeness to Hashem. When a person is busy doing those kinds of contemplations, aside from the fact that the world reminds him of Torah, that the world reminds him of Hashem, that the world reminds him of Halacha, and aside from that, when you do these contemplations about the greatness of Hashem in your Chachma and in your Bina, and that is what your mind is full of all day, then it will spill over into the Da'as mind of the person, into your conscious Da'as, where you take what you know and you apply it to yourself and you ask yourself the question, how do I feel about this? And the response will be, Lahoylid mehem al yidei hadas, that through the channel of Das, you will give birth from these thoughts, hayira b'moichay, reverence in your mind, upachad Hashem beliboy, and fear of Hashem in your heart. It starts in the mind and spreads to the heart. That's what the Alter Rebbe has described to us already several times, especially in the case of the divine soul. It has to start in your mind, how you revere Hashem, and it will end up in your heart, how you are afraid either to rebel against Hashem because of his greatness, or you are afraid to sin because it will separate you from Hashem. And maybe even the highest level, where you are afraid to sin because you are ashamed to misbehave in the presence of Hashem. If you can accomplish that, if you can feel Hashem's presence so keenly that you would embarrassed, that you're just physically embarrassed to sin in his presence, now you know you have made it. That's a very powerful connection to Hashem. That is a very powerful grasp, but it is in your mind and it influences your heart. What's the difference between what's going on in your mind and what's going on in your heart? You have to realize what's going on in your mind. The more you invest in your mind, the more permanent and real and tangible the experience of godliness in your life becomes. This is not true when you hit the emotion directly. If you're using music or art or storytelling to bring about feelings of love and reverence and fear of Hashem directly into your heart, not passing through the brain, not passing through the analytical part of the brain, then each session of inspiration is a standalone experience. They're not really feeding into each other. If they come in rapid succession, they will build on each other. Yeah, but eventually it'll all wash away and you'll go right back to where you were before. The only way to avoid going right back to where you were before is if the inspiration comes from your conscious, analytical mind. When you study the subject of Hashem's greatness, where you study the question of how close exactly you want to be to Hashem, how precious and delightful it is to be connected with Hashem, only through intellectual study do you actually accomplish any change, so that you do not quickly revert right back to where you were, and that some remnant of that experience will always remain. So the reverence that you develop in your brain is truer than the emotional fear or dread that you feel, that you'll have in your heart. Once a person has developed a sense of emotion, a sense of emotional fear and dread of Hashem as the product of the intellectual reverence that they have for Hashem, then the divine soul is hoping that it will develop even further, and that it will spring, that from it will spring the ahavas Hashem, a love for Hashem. The Alter Rebbe has already described to us several types of love for Hashem. What is love? We described just before 3 types of fear, and we ignored one type of fear completely. One type of fear is, I'm afraid that if I misbehave, I'm going to get smacked. I don't want to get smacked. We ignored that one completely. There is a fear of Hashem because he is so great and I am so small. There is a fear of Hashem that he is the king and I don't want to disobey. There is a fear of Hashem that you're ashamed to misbehave in his presence. I'm sorry, I messed it up. There is a fear of Hashem that he is so great and I am so small. There is a fear of Hashem that I don't want to be disconnected from him and therefore I don't sin. That's my fear. And the third one is I feel his presence so profoundly that I'm afraid to misbehave. I'm embarrassed to misbehave in Hashem's presence. 3 levels. Never mind the punishment one. So then what are the levels? What are the degrees of love that a person might have for Hashem? Well, that also should start in the mind, shouldn't it? So where does it begin if it's inside the mind? Inside the mind, it becomes appreciation. If a person appreciates the greatness of Hashem, not like, oh, I appreciate what you've done for me, but you really perceive the greatness of Hashem, you really grasp how wonderful Hashem is, then the result is the result is a decision, a mental decision that Hashem is good for you, that Hashem is the object of utmost value. There's nothing in the world more valuable. Then the result is that you love the thing that you value. A little off topic, but just to emphasize the point. In terms of relationships, I'm going to borrow a phrase from my father. You don't marry the one that you love. You love the one that you marry. Or in case of other people, you don't choose to love a particular friend. You don't make a person your friend because you love them. You love the person because they are your friend. In other words, first they are valuable, and in response to their value, you give them love, or your heart responds with love. That's how it is if it's coming from the brain. If it starts in the brain, it has to be value first, emotional response after. So first we have to perceive the greatness of Hashem, and we have to understand the delight and specialness of a connection to Hashem, and from there will come the love. What is that love like? There are different kinds. Says the Alter Rebbe, first of all, ki'esh boyara, like a raging fire. Where? In the brain? No. The brain doesn't rage. Brains don't rage. Brains are very calm. Brains are very cool. The heart rages. So the first step of actual heartfelt love is going to be a raging love. Kirish shal heves, like flaming fire. What's the fire all about? The yearning, the pining, like David HaMelech says, my soul pines after Hashem, so much so that the soul wants to give up its existence and just become subsumed in the light of Hashem. Because where does this come from? Why should there be a pining and why should there be pain over Hashem? Well, the only time that this is appropriate is if you are distant. When a person is distant from Hashem, the feeling of love is one of pain because you are so far away of the object of your love. Picture a child whose parents have gone away for the weekend. The child loves the parents very much, and that love brings about pain in the life of the child because the parent is away. The child wants to be near the parents. Think about the same toddler who, when the mother was absent, was screaming and crying, and now the mother is present in the kitchen and the toddler is quietly ignoring the mother. Is it fair to say that the child no longer loves the mother now that she's home? Obviously not. But because there is no distance, therefore there is no pain. And where there is no pain, there's no friction, there's no conflict, then there's no fire. But this is the feeling of the neshama. This is the feeling of the Jewish heart when it comes to understand and appreciate the greatness of Hashem, the greatness of Hashem, how much Hashem is beyond our grasp. The result is a terrible yearning, terrible as in awesome, terrible as in great, terrible as in big. Desire and yearning and thirsting and wishing and hoping, ledov gavoy be'ein soif baruch hu, to cleave to Him, to cleave to the Infinite One, b'chol leiv v'nefesh u'moed, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. May umka deliba shebechalal hayamani, from the very depths of the heart that is on the right side of the heart. That's the seat of the divine soul's emotion, on the right side of the heart. How is it that the love for Hashem should fill the heart and even reach the very depths of the heart? So the Alter Rebbe describes sheyihiyeh toichai, that the interior of the heart, the emotional space of the heart should be Ratzuf, covered, wall to wall, with ahava, with love for Hashem. Mole, it should be full, not only wall to wall, but also top to bottom, of love for Hashem, and even vigodush, even bursting and overflowing with love for Hashem. See the three stages? Ratzuf means covered, like the word ritzpa, floor. The way the floor covers the room, the way the floor covers the interior space of the room, love for Hashem should cover the interior space of the heart. Mole is now three-dimensional. It's not only across, but it's also up and down, filling every space. And godosh means packed to overflowing. And these are obviously stages. Developing a love for Hashem, making Hashem your priority is a lifetime of work. Slowly, you'll push yourself intellectually to appreciate Hashem till the love for Hashem and the yearning fills your heart from wall to wall. And then later you continue the same work until the love for Hashem fills your heart three-dimensionally from top to bottom as well as right to left, until the love for Hashem flows over the edges of your heart. Why? What happens when the love for Hashem flows over the walls of your heart? Till it should even occupy the left ventricle of the heart, which is really the seat of the animal soul. Oh, why would the divine soul want to interfere in the territory of the animal soul?
To try to push it out?
That's the point. We just said that the desire of the divine soul is that it should have sole ownership of the whole conscious space of the person. That means that from the perspective of the divine soul, a active nefesh habahamis, an active animal soul is a foreign terrorist, and the divine soul is not prepared to negotiate or to allow any space in the interior of the person's conscious life for the expressions of the animal soul. And therefore, the divine soul wants, firstly, to push the animal soul's expression out. Even of the official seat of the animal soul, the divine soul wants to push any expression of animalism out of there. So it would be a great thing if the divine soul's love and passion and enthusiasm for Hashem could spill over and occupy even the left side of the heart, the seat of the animal soul. What would be the result? Thereby to subdue the evil that is present there. That evil comes in what form? What specifically is the underlying principle, the underlying life force of the evil of the animal soul? Yesod hamayim hara'im sheba, the element of water of the animal soul. Remember, in chapter 1, we learned everything in the world is created of 4 elements: wind, water, fire, and earth. And we said that each of these 4 elements has a good aspect and a negative aspect. What is the negative aspect of water? The negative aspect of water is that it is pleasure-seeking, because all pleasure comes from water. The pleasurable things are grown only with the help of water. Therefore, when we say that we want to transform the element of water of the animal soul, the evil of the element of water of the animal soul, what we mean is we, the divine soul, wish to overrule and to subdue any expression of self-indulgence in pleasurable things that are of this world. the animal soul by nature is looking for pleasure, for comfort, which, by the way, pleasure and comfort by their very nature are not evil. The fact is that the animal soul is looking for worldly pleasure. The divine soul wants to push that interest into a corner so that it has no expression in the life of the person, that the person should not suffer the arousal of interest in worldly pleasure. Okay, so step number one, subdue the animal soul. Don't let him speak. Don't give him a voice. After many months, maybe many years of subduing the animal soul consistently, so that the human being never has to experience the animalistic yearning, the animalistic desire for worldly pleasure and delight, it is possible that the person will advance to the next level, as the Alter Rebbe describes, leshanoisa, to slowly begin to transform the animal soul. How could you transform an animal soul? Remember, we learned from the Shalom last week. And if you haven't seen the class, it's highly recommended. It was a lot of fun. The Shalom writes that the Yetzer Hara is not by its very nature evil. The Eitz Chaim from Rav Chaim Vital says it's possible to transform the Yetzer Hara into an actual Yetzer Tov. Even the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos writes that it's possible to convince the animal soul of the delights of holiness, how delightful holiness could be. The Rebbe Rashab in Kuntras Umayun says, explain to your animal soul that life comes from God. Don't you love life? Then you ought to love God. After months and maybe years of this inner talk, of this being your daily conversation with yourself, with your animal soul, it's possible to begin to change the animal soul's interests. One might call it maturing. You can mature your animal soul, just like you might mature a child. A child says, I want ice cream. Okay. After a while, the child says, I want ice cream. And you say, but don't you also want good health? And the child says, meh, ice cream more. And then the child says, but I want ice cream. And you say, don't you value good health? And they say, a little bit, but I really like ice cream. And then later the child says, don't you want, he says, I want ice cream. You say, don't you value good health? And they say, I value good health, but I still like ice cream. So I don't want to give up my ice cream. I'll have less ice cream. That's called, this is maturing. You're changing the child slowly and surely. By maturing the inner conversation, so that the child now is pitting ice cream against good health. And the more that they will come to value good health, the less they will value ice cream. The animal soul could be the same way. Slowly but surely, you can transform the inner conversation of the animal soul to, I like comfort, temporary comfort, to, I like, or the animal soul says, I like temporary pleasures. And you say to the animal soul, but don't you like eternal pleasures? Isn't a long, healthy life, a long, healthy, productive life better than ice cream? And slowly but surely, you can convince the animal soul that a long and productive and healthy life is in fact better than ice cream. And because at the foundation of this long, productive, healthy life is none other than Hashem himself. You could even convince the animal soul to yearn for a connection to Hashem. That would not only be a change, that would be an absolute transformation of the animal soul. And that's what the Alter Rebbe says next. So we have, the Alter Rebbe says, if the love that comes from the divine soul will spill over into the left side of the heart, the result will be that the animal soul's interests will be subdued. And if you keep this up for a long time, the interests of the animal souls will begin to change. And if you keep that up for a long time, the interest of the animal soul might even be absolutely transformed till the animal soul becomes a Yetzer HaTov. It will remain an animal soul, but its Yetzer will become Tov, because its interests will be Tov. Its function will still be to sustain the body, but its interests, its drive for comfort will be focused on the true source of life, and that is Hashem and Torah and mitzvahs. As the Alter Rebbe says, you will transform the interests of the animal soul from worldly delights to ahavas Hashem, loving Hashem. And now we understand what it says in the Mishnah, that when commenting on the verse in Shema, when it says, Ve'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, you shall love the Lord your God, b'chol levavecha. And the Chazal say, why are there two bases? That's not even the word. The word is b'chol libecha, with your whole heart. What is b'chol levavecha? Two bases. The two bases represent the two hearts that every person has. The Yetzer HaTov, the right side of the heart, and the Yetzer Hara that could be transformed into a Yetzer HaTov on the left side of the heart. Vehainu, in order that the divine soul should be able to achieve this transformation of the animal soul, of the Yetzer Hara, into a drive for stronger connection to Hashem, which is synonymous with Yetzer Tov, first, the divine soul itself has to generate on its side of the fence a tremendous love for Hashem. How strong is that love for Hashem? So we just now described a love for Hashem that is like the toddler in the kitchen when the mother walked away, screaming, yelling, passion, yearning, pining. There's a more profound love for Hashem, the kind of love that it takes to transform the interests of the animal soul. And what is that? So the Alter Rebbe gave a mashal one time. The difference between Musar and Chasidus. What is the difference between Musar and Chasidus? By learning Sifrei Musar, you could also become a God-fearing person. By learning Sifrei Musar, you can also become a person whose behavior is perfectly righteous all the time. Then what's the difference between the Musar and the Chasidus? The Alter Rebbe says, imagine the scenario. It's in the middle of the night in the shtetl, and a man in the shtetl hears noise coming from his house, from his kitchen. So he sneaks out with his, 1800s baseball bat. I don't know if they had those back then. Yeah. In his slippers and his bathrobe to see what's going on in his kitchen. And he sees there's a ganav. A thief is in his kitchen. So he yells and he screams and he scares the thief away. Mission accomplished. He locks the front door, goes back to bed. Can he sleep peacefully? Can he be sure this ganav will never come back? No, he has no way to be sure. Why? Because the ganav got scared, but the ganav is still a ganav. He has done nothing to convince the ganav that theft is not the way. Picture this now. There's another house down the block. The same ganav breaks in, and the owner of the house hears noise, and he takes his baseball bat and his bathrobe and his slippers, and he goes to the kitchen, and he sees the ganav. And he says to the ganav, hey, you're hungry? Don't break into my house. At 9 o'clock, I'll come home from shul. We'll have breakfast, the whole family together. Join us. Join us for breakfast. And they sit down at breakfast. And the balabas says to the ganav, tell me, how did your life, what's going on in your life that you have to resort to stealing? And the Ganav has an opportunity to pour out his heart to the Balabas. And the Balabas is empathetic. And the Balabas is explaining to him how there's got to be another way. Brachas come from Hashem. Sustenance comes from Hashem. Your livelihood comes from Hashem. You've got to do your pursuit of livelihood according to Torah and according to Halacha. There's always a better way. And don't give up hope. And anytime you're hungry, come to my house. I'll give you what I have. I don't have much, but you can have my breakfast. You can have. Now the Ganav loves the Balabas. What are the chances that this Ganav is going to steal from this Balabas again? What are the chances that this Ganav is going to steal from anybody again? Less. The chances that he's going to steal from this Balabas? Even less. That's the difference between Musar and Chassidus. Chassidus works with a person who is studying to not only leave a person yearning for a better life and dreading the downfall, the pits of evil. Chassidus wants that a person should really love the object of their service, Hashem. Chassidus wants and helps a person to appreciate you know what I'm saying?
Appreciate what we have.
And that's what the Alter Rebbe leads us to here. The Alter Rebbe leads us here to the second kind of love. Not passion, yearning, fire. I feel the pain of my distance from Hashem. That's one thing. What the Alter Rebbe describes here is what Chassidus really hopes for each person to achieve. And that is to feel a real pleasure in serving Hashem. Not because it makes me greater and not because it fills my day with productive things, but because I love the object of my service and it's a pleasure to serve. When the divine soul's love is on that level, where you do a mitzvah and you say, that's fantastic. I love the feeling. It's such a delight. Then the animal soul is attracted. The animal soul likes pleasurable things. The animal soul likes things that feel good. So when a mitzvah, when the divine soul will work so hard that to appreciate Hashem and Torah and mitzvahs and holiness to the point where the act of a mitzvah is a delight, then the animal soul is attracted and slowly comes over. There was a chassid in the old country. First the joke. What's the difference between a person that falls out the first story window and a person that falls out the third story window? What's the difference? The one that falls out of the third story window goes, bunk. And the one that falls out the first story window goes, bunk, A chassid took his young son to the frozen river to go to the mikveh before Yom Kippur. And because he knew it was cold, he prepared some towels. He put some towels and some blankets on the fireplace overnight so that in the morning they were toasty, warm. And he took his son out to the mikveh and they broke the ice, a thin layer of ice, and they crawled into the water and they went 3 times under the water and the kid screamed bloody murder. But then his father wrapped him up in the warm towels and he says, this is so beautiful. And his father said to him, the chassid tells his son, this is the difference between a mitzvah and the opposite of a mitzvah. When you do the opposite of a mitzvah, the beginning, you say, this is so much fun. This is so delightful. This is so wonderful. And in the end, you're going to be screaming from the pain and the disappointment and the frustration and all the agony that doing the wrong thing causes. But when you do a mitzvah, it might be that at the beginning you're screaming because it's uncomfortable. But in the end, it's a machaya. This is the education of Hasidus. Hasidus wants a person should learn themselves, should teach themselves, should train and gain an appreciation for mitzvahs and an appreciation for Hashem above all, to the degree where serving is a delight, is a pleasure. A child loves to do for their parents. Why? Because the parents pay them money? No. Maybe these days, but in the old days, no. Parents love to do for their children love to do for their parents. Why? Because it brings them fame? No. No. Doing for parents doesn't bring any fame. Children love to do for their parents because doing for your parents is a pleasure. You love your parents so much that doing for them is just plain and simple. It's a delightful thing to do. You love to do it. It's such a mechaya. My father was lecturing one time. There was a big crowd around, and I had heard the lecture 100 times. So I got up and I made for my father a cup of coffee. Yeah, and by the time I wandered around the room and got all the things together and whatever, I came back, the subject had changed, and I didn't know, and I put the cup of coffee down in front of him, and the crowd gasped. What happened? He says, your father was just talking about educating children to the point where they do for you without being asked. And we all thought, that's not possible. And here you have a child who did for the parent without being asked. Why did I bring my father a cup of coffee? Because I like to. It's a pleasure. It's a joy and a delight to do for my parents. This is what Hasidus wants to, this is where Hasidus wants to bring a Jew, where doing for Hashem is a delight. You love to. If that's where you are, then your animal soul, the worldly pleasures are toast. They cannot compete. Why? Because worldly delights have calories. And serving Hashem, the delight that comes from serving Hashem is calorie-free, it's gluten-free, it's sugar-free, it's lactose-free. There's no downside. It's pure pleasure. Let's read in the Alter Rebbe's words. V'hainu, that means, sheyale, that the divine soul needs to rise up, v'yavoy, and achieve, v'yagia, and reach, l'madregas ahava rabba, to the level of tremendous love, v'chiba yesera, and exceptional affection that's higher than yesera mimadregas ahava aza kirish be'esh, higher than the level of love that is raging and burning like a fire because of distance. Vehi hanikreis, because of ahava betainugim. This is what Shlomo HaMelech describes in the Song of Songs as the love of delights. Excuse me, you love the source, you love the object of your love so much that doing for them is a delight. The truth is that this kind of love for Hashem is a foretaste of the world to come. Why? Because it's only in the world to come where we will perceive godliness so openly and so clearly that it will be a delight constantly. Real delight of an intangible, real delight over an intangible thing is an intellectual experience. It's not an emotional experience. Only the brain can grasp something that is intangible and grasp it so much that it should be delightful. Hashem to the human being is intangible, and it's only via the brain that we can access the knowledge and the grasp and the connection to Hashem that it should become delightful. In the Garden of Eden, in the world of souls, it says that tzaddikim sit and they delight in the presence of the Shekhinah and the radiance of the Shekhinah. Intellectually, they perceive godliness, and it is a delight. We all aspiring Beinanis, we can achieve once in a while this feeling of delight in Hashem by using our seichel, by using our intellect to develop an appreciation and a yearning for Hashem and a love for Hashem to the point where maybe not consistently like a tzaddik, but once in a while, or certain mitzvahs, we can do them because doing that for Hashem is a delight. It's an enjoyable experience. We love to do it. Vehi bechinas hamayim, delight in your brain, intellectual delight on the part of the divine soul is the divine soul's element of water. Remember, we were trying to overcome the animal soul's element of water. How do you do that? How do you truly transform the element of water of the animal soul? Well, you have to drown it out. You have to mix into it the water of the divine soul until the original waters of the animal soul are so thoroughly washed out that all that is left is the divine soul's water, the delight and the joys of the divine soul. Love for Hashem, love for Torah and mitzvahs, love for doing the right thing. And this is called Zera Oir Zarua Shebekedushas Nefesh Elikis. This power that every Jewish soul has to delight so much from perceiving godliness, from seeing Hashem in your mind's eye, that is really in the secret light of Hashem that's buried deep in every Jewish soul, called Oir Zarua, light that is implanted in the Jewish souls, implanted in the holiness of the Nefesh or Elikis, the divine spark. HaMehapeches LeToiv, that alone has the power to transform and bring over to goodness, as Bechinas Hamayim Shebenefesh Abahamis, the element of water of the animal soul, Shemehem Bo Taivas Tanug Elam Hazem Mitchila, which previously the waters of the animal soul, the delighting, the search for pleasure of the animal soul, led to worldly desires and worldly urges. As the Eitz Chaim says in the name of the Zohar, that the evil shehara nehepach, that the evil can actually be transformed. Lihiyos toiv gomur kemoy yetzer toiv mamish. That enough work and enough clarity of mind can transform the animal soul so thoroughly that it will become actually an inclination towards good instead of inclining towards evil. How do you do that? By removing the filthy clothing from the animal soul. What is the filthy clothing? They are the tanuga elam hazeshu melubash bahem. They are the desires and yearnings and lusts and interests for worldly things that the animal soul was previously involved with. This is all the intellectual, emotional experience of what it might be like to allow your divine soul to take full possession of your conscious life, your conscious inner life. And that should spread then also to the garments of your inner life, your vehicles of expression. The love for Hashem will also take over all the other emotions of the heart. If you revere Hashem completely so that there's no room for any reverence of anything else, as in the words of the Baal Shem Tov's father, fear nothing but Hashem. And there is love in your heart that fills it from wall to wall and spills over. As the words of the Baal Shem Tov's father, love every Jew with all of the depths of your heart. And loving every Jew includes Hashem. So you fear nothing but Hashem. That means your whole faculty, your whole capacity for fear and reverence is occupied by Hashem. And your whole faculty, your whole capacity for love is filled with love for Hashem and a fellow Jew. Then the result is that all your other emotions will also become focused. Your capacity for all other emotions will be filled with and focused on Torah and Hashem and the Jewish people and your mission in life and doing the right thing and connecting to holiness. And that will obviously spread. All of your capacity to speak and your whole capacity to think will be absolutely filled with the garments of thought and speech of the divine soul, which means thoughts about Hashem and the Torah, and that your conversation throughout the day will be a Torah conversation, and your mouth would never cease from speaking words of Torah, and the activities of your hands and your other limbs will always only be a mitzvah action, which is the third garment of expression, the third vehicle of expression of the divine soul. So the Alter Rebbe covered thought and speech and action, where your actions are always throughout the whole day in line with your divine soul. I told the story before, but we'll share it again because it fits here. The previous Rebbe once witnessed his father, the Rebbe Rashab, washing his hands during the morning, preparing for the day, preparing for davening, differently than the way he washed at mealtime. In the morning washing, the Rebbe Rashab would wash. Obviously, the difference is that in preparing for davening, you wash once on the right, once on the left, once on the right, once on the left, once on the right, once on the left, consecutively, or alternating between the right hand and the left hand. You wash each hand 3 times, alternating. And then by mealtime, you wash 3 times consecutively the right hand and 3 times consecutively the left hand. That's obvious. But the Frierdiker Rebbe noticed another difference. And this difference was in the way that the Rebbe Rashab dried his hands and held his hands during the recitation of the bracha. In the morning times, the Rebbe Rashab was very meticulous to dry his hands perfectly, and then to hold his hands up to the cheekbone level, to the level of the payas like this, elbows forward, not off to the side. That's according to Kabbalah. I don't know what it means, but that's what it is. And he would have washed his hands, one on the right, one on the left, alternatingly for the morning. Then he was very careful to dry his hands completely, and then he would hold his hands like this, and with dry raised hands, say the bracha al netilas yadayim. By mealtime, the Rebbe Rashab would wash 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and catch on the third pour over the left hand, catch some water in his hand. Say the bracha baruch atah Hashem al netilas yadayim. With the water that he caught in his hand, he would rub the hands together like this, and like washing them a second time. And then while the hands were, and then he had already said the bracha, he would rub his hands together like washing them a second time, and then dry his hands. And if Frierdiker Rebbe said, where is the source for this? Why do you do this? The Rebbe Rashab said, I don't know offhand the source, but if I'm doing it, there is a source. Because long ago I trained myself only to behave in accordance with Allah. And then later in the day, the Rebbe Rashab indeed found the source, and that's how you're supposed to do it. But that's not the exciting part, the fact that the Rebbe Rashab knew where the source was. The point is that if the Rebbe Rashab had trained his body that only halacha actions get to be performed by the body. If it's not a halacha action, the body doesn't do it. That's called your whole capacity for action is filled only with the activities of the divine soul. Obviously, excuse me. Obviously, the original instinctive desire of the animal soul is exactly the opposite. Everything that we described about how the divine soul wants to take over and transform the animal soul's desire is exactly the opposite. It wants to take over and occupy the whole conscious space of the person, that all of his curiosity should be about nonsense, and that all of his intellectual prowess should be about self-indulgent things, and that all of his personal interests should be about selfish and indulgent and comfortable and self-aggrandizement and so on and so forth. And even his thoughts should be filled with that, and his words should be, and his actions should all be all self-serving, all pleasure-seeking. That's the wish of the animal soul originally, until you've transformed it using the power of your neshama. L'toivas ha'adam, it would be the benefit of the person, sheyisgaber aleha v'yinatzcheha, to overpower the animal soul and to beat it down, to take over and to take control. Kimshal hazena shebezeir hakadosh, the Zohar hakadosh gives us the analogy of a prostitute that was hired by the king to test the prince's moral fiber. Obviously, it is for the benefit of the prince not to listen to this although she is a member of the king's staff now, hired by the king and given a special mission by the king to I forgot the word, whatever, to inspire the prince to do something wrong, it's obviously in the best interest of the prince not to listen to her and to understand that this is a test, that this is an opportunity to overpower and to show your strength and your power and your prowess. That is Hashem's interest. That is in the best interest of the Beinoni, and that is what you can explain even to your animal soul. This is what is even the best thing for you. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful day.